Hi, everybody. Dan Illman. Ashley Mailloux taking a look at the feature race at Woodbine on Saturday. Let's throw up the field for race number 8. We're going 6.5 furlongs on the E.P. Taylor turf course, and it's the $100,000 Alywow for 3-year-old fillies. And no, your eyes are not deceiving you. 4 of the 7 trained by Mark Casse.
Yeah, we've been talking about kind of connections, taking a lot of swings here. Mark Casse, you mentioned, has 4 horses in here. We see this in the States a lot, but he's never afraid to enter more in the same race for his different owners. And looking at some of them in here, the number 1 Stormcast, that was a very nice second last time out in the Honey Rider. He also sends the 3 out in here, who's interesting maybe from a speed perspective. Has shown a little bit of that early speed down on the Tapeta at Gulfstream Park. And even his other runners, I mean, none of his horses look like a live long shot in here. They all look respectable on the tote.
And as you mentioned, he has all the bases covered from a pace standpoint. As we take a look at the Timeform US pace projector, we're not expecting a ton of pace in here. The race might favor front runners, and that's good news for 2 of the Casse trained runners, the 1 Stormcast, the 3 Correa. These are horses that can be right up close to the pace. Dancing Duchess is very, very tactical. She'll be sitting just off. And if the pace heats up, Creed's Gold's going to come with a late kick. So Cassie's in strong control.
Absolutely. And I think the 6.5 furlong distance is interesting when you look at this field. You have a couple horses coming out of more of those mile races or horses that race well at 5 furlongs. So it's kind of that middle marker. I think this is going to give some horses a better shot to be able to close more in the stretch, depending what the pace is, or maybe they can go to the front and hang on. So it's a tough one to handicap top to bottom.
Your morning line favorite is Stormcast, who earned a big Buyer speed figure sprinting on the turf in her turf debut in her final start last year at 2. She went to the sidelines for a long time, but came back with a really nice effort in this race, the Honey Rider Stakes at Gulfstream Park, where she sat from just off of it trying to go a mile, grabbed command turning into the stretch. We're going to see Zoe Lee get up for third, and she's pretty game to run second. A mile might just be a little bit too far for this daughter of Matoli at this point in her career, but considering the layoff, this is a fine performance, and she faced 2 next out winners.
Yeah, you talk about next out winners. One of them being the winner of this race came back to win the Martha Washington. I know it was on a different surface. It was run on the Tapeta this year, but I think it kind of speaks to the field in general. And we're seeing 3 horses exit that race and enter into this one. So I like her. I think she's going to take a step forward, second off the freshening. There's a long time in between those races. And I just wonder here, Dan, with that inside draw and her running style, she's just going to be in the perfect spot to be able to close late, not have too much work to do.
I'm still trying to figure out what kind of horse the number 2 Zoe is from a distance standpoint. Both of her wins came sprinting at Colonial Downs, but kind of her breakout performances over the winter came going 2 turns, especially in the Honey Rider that we just saw where she ran third. Now, she didn't perform very well last time out at Horseshoe Indianapolis. I wonder if that little give in the ground and a bit of a tough trip worked against her.
Yeah, and we'll have to kind of see what the weather ends up being going into Saturday at Woodbine. They are off the turf for Thursday, and just knowing that it rained very heavily overnight, a little bit rain later this week, it wonders how much give will be in the ground once again. I will say, I think I agree with you. I'm not sure what she wants. Does she want to be a sprinter or does she want to go longer? I don't know, but that's where I think 6.5 furlongs becomes a very interesting distance for a horse like her, especially on the E.P. Taylor, where you do have that wide sweeping turn. It's not a narrow turn like an inner turf course would have. So maybe it helps her in some chance, and maybe this is a gauge to see what she wants to do. But even going back to her first start of her 3-year-old season in the Sanibel Island, I think all in all, at the odds that she was and the trips that she had, she ran okay, and that was 7.5. So you wonder, if you take a turn away and cut back a furlong, if she could have at least a piece.
It'll be the Woodbine debut for the number 3 Correa, who's a pretty hardy filly. I mean, she's run 6 times already without a breakdown in South Florida. Her most recent start was the Honey Rider, and maybe a mile is just too far for her. Prior to that race, she'd done nothing wrong, hitting the board in her first 5 starts, including 3 consecutive wins. The wins came on synthetic, so we'll have to see if she's as effective on turf as she is on the all-weather.
Yeah, and for her, the distance, I don't know how much of a question it will be. When she won at 5.5, yes, her lead was getting a little bit slimmer, but she had to do it all on the front end. She came back with a very nice win where she went even faster. Yes, she cut back in distance, but she went almost 44 flat to the half mile there in that 5 ace race. And I think what I like the most about her is in her following race, she didn't make the lead when we go to the Melody of Colors, where she had to sit the trip. She did make a little bit of ground up late, and she only missed by 3/4 of the length behind Twirling Queen, who came back to win next time out. So with that said, do I think she's going to show speed on Saturday? Yes. But if for some reason she doesn't break the sharpest and someone really wants to go, I think she can sit off of that horse and have a target. And I think 6.5 is probably what she needs. I don't think she wants to go 2 turns.
Dancing Duchess, the number 4, appears to be rounding back into her best form. This will be her 3rd start of the year, and she was good enough to beat the boys, going 5/8 of a mile on the inner turf at Woodbine in her final start as a 2-year-old. I thought her last race was just fine, going 5/8 on the inner turf again at Woodbine. It was a fast pace. She made a middle move into it. She flattened out, but the runner-up came back to win out of conditions, taking a 3rd-level allowance with an 82 buyer. I love her tactical speed in this race. I think she's just going to be sitting in a prime spot in the second flight.
And you talked about the win on the inner. I think the other one to go back to is she does have a win at the 6.5 in the Soar Free. And talking about the whole Mark Cassidy angle, entering multiple horses who beat her, Golden Canary or stablemate. So that was sort of the situation that we saw on that day. I thought it was a very nice performance from her. And I think for her, in terms of where it's going to work out, she's going to get a good trip. I think there were maybe some concerns about her now that she's going to go 6.5. She hasn't won her first 2 starts this year. They've tried different things with her, but I don't think it's going to be an issue. I think if you kind of look at her, she has taken a progression. She's gotten a little bit better and can take another step forward.
Creed's Gold is the number 5, and while her only lifetime win came going 2 turns, I don't mind her cutting back to 6.5 furlongs, especially if this pace is fair. She's coming off of a useful effort off a short layoff, and I think this race was probably a prep, but 2 life allowance, going a 1-turn mile on June the 1st. We're going to watch Creed's Gold finish a good second in this race, and she was charging pretty hard in the end. She did get the right pace set up, I thought, but off of a short layoff as a prep, I think this is a really good springboard-like performance.
I think so too. And I think to see her back in the entries 3 weeks later is a positive sign. I like the trip that she got. She was able to make up ground in here. And even going back to her maiden score down at Gulfstream Park, I thought, that was a pretty good win going a mile. I know it was going longer, but for her and kind of her running style, I don't think the cutback will hurt her. And I talked about the race at Gulfstream. The 3rd place winner, Pendulum, came back to win a maiden special weight against older 3-year-olds and upward down at Churchill with a nice buyer, maiden special weight competition. So she's intriguing here. I think if you are looking for a price around 6-1, if you're anywhere near there, she's probably the value in here.
Rossa, the number 6, is going to add blinkers and return to 6.5 furlongs. And perhaps that's the key, because her most recent win came at this distance with blinkers, albeit over the Tapeta surface at Presque Isle Downs. Is she as good on turf? The jury is still out, but she's going to be a price in this race, and she's another that could use a little bit of pace help up front.
Yeah, I'm curious how much of a price she's going to be. She's gotten a little bit of hype around her, and kind of looking at this race a little bit. She's getting blinkers on, and looking at the connections, they've been red hot. So I still think she will be a price. I just don't know how big in this spot, Dan. And for me, the turf is the question. They're going to try something new. Obviously, they have made a very conscious effort to keep her in stakes competition as you go down the page, and have high hopes for her. And she's been working well, but I just wasn't sure what to make out of her, knowing that at least in her last 3, she hasn't made any sort of a late impact, right? She's not merely making up ground. She's just been even. And I feel like others in here maybe are showing a little bit more to this point.
It'll be the turf debut for the number 7, Uphill Dance, who will also make her first start as a 3-year-old, and she showed some ability in her first 2 starts before trying her hand against stakes competition, and maybe those stakes races were just a little bit too much too soon for her. She's now had the winter to grow up. I think there's enough turf pedigree here, and she did face some really good horses last time out in the Mazarine. I mean, that 3rd place finisher not only came back to next out win a stakes race, I think that horse just won a grade 3 Miss Preakness at Pimlico.
Right. And, I agree. I think those stakes races, to me at least, were probably a little bit more challenging than some others have faced at this point. And I think, they're going to try something new with her. They're going to cut her back in distance for her 3-year-old debut, which we do see a lot of trainers do, right, to use this as a starting point. But hey, they want to stay with a stake with her. She's going to be a huge price in here. And I will say, you look at the most recent work, it's tough to say when you don't physically see the work, but a respectable time nonetheless.
Let's take a look at our top selections for the Alywow. I think a lot of these fillies have long-term potential, maybe more long-term potential than our top pick, Stormcast. I just think Stormcast fits the conditions of this race right now.
Absolutely. I think the distance comes up well. The running style works well with the inside draw. And I just think knowing that she has the inside, she has a fair bit of early footer, can get in a good trip. She looks tough in here, but not much of a price down, 2-1 on the morning line.
1324 for Ashley, 1362 for me. It's the Alywow, some promising 3-year-old fillies sprinting on the turf at Woodbine on Saturday. Good luck.